So, welcome, Wendy VanAllen, to Wisdom from Spiritual Direction Work. And I've been trying to connect with Wendy, who is a very busy person, for 2 years now. So glad we got a chance to talk today. A little bit about Wendy. Her center is Soul Blossom Center. Spiritual counseling is what she does. And we're going to talk a little bit about what called you to spiritual work. And I also your book that just came out, because Wendy is a recently published Llewelyn author. And so we'll talk about that. And why don't we start with, also I'll mention that I'll put links to anything we mention and to Wendy's website down in the description of this video so you can click through and get more information. So welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here with you, Amy.
Yeah. If we could start, just tell us a little bit about what you were an archaeologist. So what moved you from that profession to this profession, and what's your calling, and how have things changed in that process?
Great question. I'm somebody who over my life has changed my career dramatically since I started working when I was, since I started college. My first degree was in journalism and mass media at Rutgers University. And while I worked, I found that I just did not have the passion for advertising, public relations, marketing that's needed. It really didn't satisfy me. So when my children were born, I went back to school for something that really does excite me, which is anthropology. I've always been interested in culture, religion, language, ancient history, and somebody who practices and has practiced Wicca and nature spirituality for a long time since I was, basically 18 years old. It was a really nice fit. So, my goal was to become an archaeologist, which I did. And I made the decision not to stay in that career because my children were little. And if you're an archaeologist, you really need to travel. and, and while I still have a passion for it, it just did not fit with that part of my life that I was in, and I made the decision to be a mom to them. So I used my education and I went into actual different types of administrative and human resource type roles. And I did that for a while. Along the way, somewhere I got to that point again where I was in corporate HR and I just felt unfulfilled. But this whole other side of myself was really flourishing, and that was my spirituality. I had, years of practice of Wicca, pagan community, and I also was called to explore Santeria or Lukumi. I kind of look at it as I'm a person who is multicultural. I have my father is, you know, mostly Irish and Dutch as an American, and my mother's from Puerto Rico.
Hmm.
So it kind of like, honoring both sides of my ancestries. So I had always, I started to really explore things like I went to the Holistic Studies Institute. I was trained as an intuitive consultant, and I started giving readings like more professionally, saying I could do this, I'm going to do this kind of work. And that's when I went to One Spirit. After I had gone through some initiations, I had pretty much reclaimed that part of myself. And, when I went to One Spirit Learning Alliance, I was called to the concept of interspirituality. And I realized that's the name for what I do. I practice more than one faith tradition. And I believe that there's core values and beliefs in many different traditions, and it's okay to do those things. It was so liberating to me to say, we don't have to be one faith. We don't have to practice one tradition. Many of us actually see it in a different way.
Mhm.
And I signed up. I really had the intention of just like deepening my skills as a reader or somebody that does this stuff on the side. I didn't know where it was going. They suggested maybe you should become an interfaith, interspiritual minister. And I never saw myself in that role. Like I've been a priestess, I've done circles, I've led circles, but I've never seen myself as somebody that would do that. And so, but I said, let me follow spirit, let me follow spirit. And that was kind of like the beginning. From the after I completed the seminary program and became ordained, I started working there at One Spirit, and I worked for 4 years as the director of student services, and enjoyed it thoroughly. Enjoyed meeting a lot of different people, and said, I want to go into this spiritual counseling program as well. It was calling me. I saw the skills that are developed as something that could be used in any profession. It added to the idea that, ministry is a verb, not a noun. We do the work, we show up, we companion people. And that's really where it began. And ever since, it has led to so many different doors, one thing after another, and I found my passion, as you said, like what drove you to this? It's just, I really realized I like working with people directly. So when COVID happened and I got laid off from my job because I had moved from the city, New York City, up here to the Hudson Valley, started working at Omega, the Omega Institute, which is very similar to One Spirit. I was laid off, like most of us, in that. And I said, well, what do I want to do? And I said, I really enjoy doing this spiritual counseling. Maybe if I got my master's degree in clinical counseling, I could really transition to doing it full time. So that led me to go to St. Bonaventure over the last 3 years, which is why I've been so hard to get in touch with.
Yeah.
But I just completed my master's degree. And so I kind of look at my career now as mainly as a counselor, whether I'm working with clients clinically or spiritually.
Great um, story that you are actually able to follow your passion, and you have since you're able to survive, you're able to be sustainable
Yes.
following your passion, which is one of the big questions my students ask me. Can I live on this kind of work?
Right.
So,
I absolutely think so. I think the main thing is that we practice what we preach, right? What we teach others is like, how is spirit guiding you? What is spirit leading you to? Where's your passion? Like, and by doing it ourselves, we'll be amazed by the doors that open. How your life can really be led, and you can find fulfillment, and yes, you can make a living. I have colleagues that they do spiritual counseling primarily. That's what they do. They didn't go the credentialing route the other way. I felt like I wanted to, for
mhm.
me, because I have that scientific side that I just really wanted to learn more about psychotherapy and psychology. And I can see how they both complement each other, but I can also see how they're different. And for me, there will come a point when I could work directly for me. I could have my own choice of clients, and I could, by getting that license, I'm able to take insurance if I want to continue with clinical clients. But I'm still building my spiritual counseling base as well. I think that students should really realize that as long as you follow through with what you're being led to, and you can see this as a broadly applying in different ways, you'll be surprised at how well you can make a living from it.
Encouraging words. um, you're talking about spiritual work with clinical training, and you were doing spiritual work
Mhm.
before you got the clinical training. Can you kind of pick some of that apart for us? What is the difference between therapy, counseling, companioning, intuitive work? How do those relate to each other? How do you know when you're doing one thing and when you're doing something else?
Yeah, no, those are great questions, and I think a lot of people are curious about that. Um, so if we're looking through a clinical psychotherapy counseling lens, now I've been trained as a mental health counselor. I am not a clinician in the sense of psychotherapy, uh, the medical model, right? Even though we are able to diagnose, we do develop treatment plans, we do work with the client to, maximize their mental, physical, and their mental health. We also now they have really opened up the lens of that, and it's also about their uh, physical, their mental, their spiritual, their best self, right? But it is very clinical, and people that will come to you for clinical counseling are coming for a certain reason. They're doing so because they're seeking help with some kind of behavioral or mental issue that's been bothering them. It could be rooted in their past. That's that lens, right? And
Mhm.
it's very specific. And whereas spirituality can be a strength in that lens, it's not the focus. On the other hand, spiritual counseling is about meeting people where they are. We don't diagnose, we don't develop treatment plans. It's not clinical. I like the term companioning because we're walking alongside that person on their journey. That doesn't mean that they might not go through something that we have to hold space for, right? So I'm sure you're teaching your clients how do I deal with it when somebody's going through grief? How do I handle somebody going through a trauma? Because trauma is part of life, right? But that's not the focus, and we repeatedly, the main focus is how does that person's spiritual connection to their own form of, higher power, god, goddess, source, whatever they want to call that, how does that inform their life, and how can I be part of that growth for them, how can I be part of that experience for them?
Yeah, I love that you said that the spirituality is their strength. And when you're
Yes.
coming in as a clinical focus, you may be looking at a problem, but you are
Right.
also bringing in strengths. And when you're, if I heard you correctly, you're saying with a spiritual focus, your primary focus is the strength, is the spirituality.
Right, is their spirituality, exactly. So it's a different focus, right? So with spiritual direction, and in terms of the difference with other spiritual, or how you can incorporate your own style, right? Some of us who are intuitive, it depends on your client. It so much depends on your client. We let the client lead us. We don't lead, and that's, I think, how we differ from coaches. With a coach, there's a certain orientation. Okay, this is what I do. This is how I work. I'm going to direct you to be your best self in whatever way that is, which is fine. And a lot of people want that, but
Mhm.
that's not what we do. I think that depending on a person's spiritual background, beliefs, where they are in their growth, where they want to grow, is how we approach. So, for instance, I have clients of all different faith traditions. When I went to seminary and when I went to ISC first, I had the sole intention I was going to work with nature-based, earth-based, pagans. I really didn't think I would ever work with, Christians, or I kind of limited myself. I realized later that I was like, wow, that's so self-limiting. And as I've grown in my interspirituality and in my appreciation for other faith traditions, and made peace with some of the wounding that we've all taken on in the dominant culture, um, I have all sorts of clients now, and I meet them where they are, and I speak there. I try to understand their language, and that's where cultural humility comes in. If I don't understand what you're telling me, can you teach me more about what you believe and who you are as a person, and how spirit shows up for you?
Could you share a little bit more? So I'm curious about, because you have credentialing as an intuitive. Is that something that you put out there, and that is something that helps you find the people who are right for you, and they're seeking that kind
Hmm.
of support? And what does that
I
look
think
like?
yeah, Amy, that's a great question. I think that I have to lean in sometimes more with that intuitive, like making sure it's a good match. I mean, I think it's imperative for new counselors or companions starting out to have some kind of um, introduction to them in
Mhm.
their in their documents, that your intake document, saying, okay, tell me a little bit about yourself or your faith tradition. This is a little bit about me. I think introducing ourselves that way is really important, putting those important parts of ourselves out there, so that it might, to me, it's like two types of religion. We have inclusive and exclusive. A person that's exclusive in their faith and in their traditions would not be a match for me, so that would help with that. But intuitive, I think that's a really good point. Yes, I do use my intuition in my sessions, and when I feel something very strongly, I will present it as something that maybe they would be welcome to receive it. Some of my clients, we actually go into meditation, we go into journeying, we receive guidance from angels or ancestors or spirits. It depends on the client. It absolutely depends on the client. And I also do, I might use something like, I like to use the different types of intuitive cards, not necessarily the tarot, because I think the tarot has its own energy and it's very specific. It's a specific type of reading. I don't really, I used to read more with the tarot. I don't that much anymore. I use more like, uh, there's one deck that I really like. It's Angels and Ancestors cards by, I think his name is Philip Gray. That's a great deck, and or I might pull an animal card, and then we'll talk about it. And I usually begin with, what is this telling you? What is this for you first? Letting the client lead.
Yeah. So providing a visual and listening to their
Yes, the
intuition.
symbol.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. I love Carl Jung. That's been my postgraduate work now. I'm really immersing myself in his understanding, and I find it so valuable to those of us who do this work.
So the active imagination.
Yes, it's magic.
Yeah. Great. So, um, in the fact that you angels and ancestors, you said, and let's make sure, remind me to put the link in the description
Yes.
below so folks can
Yes.
find those. Um, ancestor work, um, I associate ancestor work with Afro-Caribbean tradition. Is that
Mhm.
something that you particularly
Absolutely.
bring in because of that tradition, or?
I would definitely say yes. I think, and actually, I spoke about this last night when I was giving a speech on my book and nature spirituality at Omega last night. Is that I believe ancestor veneration and is part of all earth-based tradition, and
Mm.
I think that especially those of us who've been in the pagan community for a while now, we realize more today than probably in the past how much of that informed those faith traditions, right? Because it was the ancestors that called people to connect to their Celtic, to their Germanic, to their Italian. That's the ancestors that brought them in. So now people are beginning to take it to the next step, even. But yes, in Afro-Caribbean tradition, nothing is done without first invoking and honoring your ancestors. And I actually do ancestor work with some of my clients. I've seen miracles, Amy. I've seen people really grow. People really have healed some inner wounding, some ancestral trauma, some patterns in their family life. Ancestor work is extremely powerful.
Okay. So you mentioned you spoke at Omega, and so talking about things that someone could do with this kind of credential. Um, I know that on the West Coast, there's places like Brighton Bush, the East Coast, Omega, Kripalu, um, centers like that. And you also worked at seminary, is that right?
I worked at One Spirit Learning Alliance, and from there, one of my clients through there founded her own seminary. It's a progressive Catholic independent organization. She's amazing. In 3 years, she went from three clients to 30, three students to 30. It's very independent. It's very open-minded. It's the kind of the languaging is God, mother, father.
Mhm.
So I'm very much in alignment with, and she invited me to teach. So there was a door that opened that I didn't know was possible. So I now have done some teaching on what spiritual counseling and companion is there, as well as teaching about nature spirituality at Omega. I teach there about nature spirituality. So I apply some of what I know through my own faith traditions, but also showing others how they can do this work. And the students are really happy there. I mean, they're all like, I think that it's really a shift, Amy, that why this is so important now is because people churching is not as common as it used to. And but there's still a need to
Yes,
honor the sacred in people's lives.
beloved
So
community.
that beloved community, we're following a niche. There is a niche there. And for a lot of my have clients now that I work with for years that once a month it's their time for themselves. We connect with. And some people want it more. I have one client now, I see her every 2 weeks,
Mhm.
because that's their sacred time. And from my client base, I have a circle now that goes. I have at least 3 or 4 of my clients come to a Wicca circle that I do out of at Soul Blossom here on Zoom.
On
So
Zoom.
just following the guidelines, following the guidance, following spirit, stepping into my confidence, I want to say, has allowed me to open doors that I never thought were possible, including writing a book. Like, that's just amazing to me that happened this too. So yeah, don't be afraid. Like, people just need to trust in their own wisdom that took them to coming to you as your student and to saying, there's something here for me. I want to know what it is. I'm going to trust in it. And it might be the kind of thing where you do it on the side. It's like something that you can begin having a side hustle, for lack of a better term. They have a regular job, or they're mothers, or they're, taking caretakers of some kind, but they also do spiritual counseling. And it could begin with their community. It could begin with it might even be maybe they're in recovery and they're doing 12-step, and other people want to develop their spirituality. There's so many applications for this work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, your book. Tell me about your book. What made you decide to write this book? And tell me about it.
Thank you. So my book is called Relighting the Cauldron: Embracing Nature Spirituality for the Modern World. And it's a book about why I believe that, first of all, that there's many different types of nature spirituality that have been the caretakers, the holders of wisdom, and also the activists leading towards, addressing climate change and addressing the climate catastrophe that's going on now. You had mentioned, it's something that I read from you recently about that whole, like, we have to honor the grief of this. We are going through existential times, and it's only going to get worse. I just read a very tragic story from, I think, the scientists just published in Nature. It's a peer-reviewed article that they're saying it's not decades we have; it's years, if we're lucky, before it really breaks down. So my book is a call, is my gift to my grandchildren and my great grandchildren, when they say, what did you do, what did your generation do, mother, grandmother, like. And I'm going to say, there are some of us who are screaming into the void. And my book pretty much goes through the 3 types of nature spirituality practitioners that have been doing the work. And the first is indigenous people around the world. So the second is Afro-Caribbean traditions, is a nature spiritual practice that has endured a lot of discrimination, misunderstanding, but it's endured and it's thriving. And the third are neo-pagan people, bringing it back, reclaiming their traditions. I interviewed 3 people from each of those traditions, and I kind of identified some commonalities of practice and beliefs and the kinds of things and why it helps heal ourselves and can also help us heal our planet. So that was what the book was about. And yeah, I hope you can read it. I think you'll find it. My goal was to inspire people. And last night, one of the women that came to the talk, um, an African American woman, she said, I have too many books, but what you said just really inspired me and kind of connected pieces for me about how I can be of service to the earth. And I said, well, then I did my job. I did my job, because the goal is to really get us to relight that cauldron, the cauldron being that fire we have to be that matches the earth mother's fire, her fiery belly, so that's it's really kind of like my ministry right now, is sharing that knowledge. And the reason I wrote it is because I have that, I am that person that's walked in all 3 of those, who has connections to all of those traditions.
Thank you for doing that good work. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I went to the Parliament of the World's Religions last week, which was fantastic. It was in Chicago. As you know, it's an interfaith, interspiritual, event that happens every 3 to 5 years around the world.
Mhm.
People from all traditions come. Matthew Fox had a cosmic mass. Have you ever attended one?
No.
They're awesome. It was really beautiful. It was very interspiritual. And one of the things that was so moving, he said, you know, there's only two types of people in the world right now, those who are mourning the planet and those who are in denial. So we're going to make space to mourn before we have the sacrament. And we did. As you know, hundreds of people had a moment to really wail and to acknowledge, you know, and that's what we have to do. We have to hold the grief, and that might be what we do is spiritual companionings. Right now we may be that army of people that help people through through the emergency crisis, and it might be for ongoing. It's probably going to be ongoing. So just being able to have the capacity to grow your capacity for, you know, meeting people where they are in grief and in joy.
So one of the questions I want to ask you was, I'm going to go ahead and ask it because you're kind of talking about it already. And that is, what is it about this work that breaks your heart?
Mhm. Yeah, I think in general, and this really goes to clinical counseling as well. We can companion somebody, but we can't cure them. We can't we don't fix. Even more so for spiritual companions and counselors, we don't fix. But the very presence of a person who has done the work on ourselves with somebody who's dysregulated and somebody going through a crisis, that alone is maybe all we need to do. So growing that capacity, having it's heartbreaking sometimes, and we have to also take care of ourselves. It's crucial that we do self-care, that we learn how to disconnect when we're hearing tragedy and heartbreak, which is today, which is the world we live in. We have to find balance, and I talk about that in my book too. We have to find what brings us joy.
Yes. Yes. And that's my next question then. What is it that brings you
Oh,
great joy about
that's
this
great. I'm glad that we're so simpatico right now.
work?
Um, I think that what brings me joy and what roots me and grounds me is that connection to the earth, you know, just being in nature. Whenever I get overwhelmed by the world that is human, I just look at the trees and I sit with the birds and I realize, you know, or I might even go to a museum and see pictures of the cosmos at like, you know, or go to watch a video about that really takes me away, that zoom out, you know, to say the world is much bigger and the universe is much grander than I am and my problems and even the problems of our planet. So
Amazing.
holding a practice that, yes, holding the practice of honoring the seasons to me is really healthy. It's crucial for me. You know, we're up here where I live in New York. You know, we're coming in towards the end of the summer and into the fall, and it's like almost like an exhale. And it's so in alignment with my life right now. It's what I need.
Beautiful. So a lot of what we've been talking about, I've kind of been having students of spiritual direction work in mind, and I'm wondering if there's anything you'd want to say about spiritual work for seekers, not those
Mm-hmm.
who are offering, but those
Can
who
you
would be
define
seeking.
seekers? What do you mean?
I
Yeah, just
mean,
give me a little bit.
I mean, what should somebody who's wondering if spiritual direction work is the right step for them?
Mm-hmm.
A seeker is someone who is going to get to be listened to and
Mm-hmm.
honored, and their strengths are going to be lifted up, and their relationship to what they hold holy will be lifted up and strengthened.
Exactly.
Um, what is it that you would want folks seeking spiritual support to know about spiritual direction work, companioning, or spiritual counseling?
Well, I guess I heard the question a little different. The first thing I'd like to do is if I could share with those that want to be spiritual directors or counselors, companions, people that want to do that work, is do your own work. We really need to heal our own wounds. That's vital, that's crucial. If you are still in pain over something, especially spiritually, you're in some kind of rage, you haven't healed, you can recognize your biases, right? And address them. You will be so much more effective for the seeker, especially the seeker who's still figuring it out. Okay? That's so important that we do our own work. For seekers, those why they might think, why would this be right for me? I would say to that person, if you feel the need to deepen your relationship to your spirituality, to your belief system, to have that strength, to really no longer feel alone, to help you make decisions, to help you through the highs and lows of life, to give you, to be with you. When people that those of us who really have faith and a strong practice, we don't feel alone. And that's something that a lot of people might be missing in their life. So if that's something that's missing, that's spiritual direction and spiritual counseling and companionship are all ways that you can access that.
Yes. So,
And I think for me, just another point that I want to make, I consider a spiritual director somebody that works more in one faith tradition, that kind of is more of a little bit more that they might guide. For the kind of work that I would do is I would counsel them as in more of a partnership and a companionee, walking alongside of them.
the
I
companion.
think that's really the only difference. I think they're all valid in their own way.
Yeah, I find the word companion to be much more descriptive of the experience than
Right.
spiritual director. And I know there are some folks out there who are directive directors, but there are also many folks out there who are absolutely companions, even though they're using the director word. So
Yeah, exactly.
and that circles back to what you said earlier, that as the person who is offering companioning, there needs to be some time spent finding out if this is the right person to work with. As a companion,
Right.
as a seeker, find out if this is a
Mm-hmm.
match and this is someone you want to be companioning you in your explorations, in your seeking. So,
Yeah, and it also benefits us to know others, to have a network of folks. Like I'm sure the students that are going through your seminary are, I hope they're encouraged to, work with each other, to have peers, like, so that this way, well, this person might not be right for me, but they'd be great for Justin, like
right,
like
right.
that really helps too. I just did that with one of my supervisees at One Spirit. She was having trouble, really got what she needed from her one companion, but I was asking for a different style, so I recommended somebody else that I knew from what she was sharing with me might work. So it does help to have a network as well.
Absolutely. Is there any last parting words that you'd like to share?
Just that I think that your seminary is fantastic. I love that, it's really offering a space to be credentialed, to be valid. I think we have to take ourselves seriously as pagans. It goes
Absolutely.
to what I spoke about in my book. We are faith traditions that are absolutely essential right now in this time of global climate change. Who better than people that love the planet, love Earth, love nature, have done our work around, feminine spirituality, about the divine mother, who are able to speak for the voice of the earth. Other than indigenous Afro-Caribbean, those are our allies. I think that's an important thing, is just to take yourself seriously. You have every right to do that. And if you have unhealed wounds, to the students who might still be in the closet, the broom closet, as we say, do what you have to do to come out of that closet. You know, and I went to a wonderful workshop. It was Jean Bolin, I forget her last name. Ashoda, she wrote The Goddesses in Every
Shinoda
Woman.
Bolin. Yeah.
Exactly. She gave a workshop about the witch wound. And she spoke about that. She named it this wound that many of us carry from being persecuted. And it could be from another lifetime, but it could be in this lifetime.
Mhm.
It could be in this lifetime that people carry being otherized, persecuted, feeling shame for who they are in their belief system. So do that work around that wound because we're so needed right now.
Yeah. It's a gift. We are carrying a gift in our connection to the earth and our love for the earth, because it's that love that's going to create a future.
Exactly. And it's also honoring the gift of intuition, of understanding there's a place for guidance from spirit, that
Yes.
it's nothing to be ashamed of. It doesn't have to be pathologized. It doesn't have to be something that we have to hide.
Amen.
Right. So if anything, we have that edge, right?
Ah, fabulous. Thank you so
Great.
much. Thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom and your experience. And I will put stuff in the links about the cards and all the other wonderful things that have been mentioned in our time together.
Well,
Blessing.
thank you. I really appreciate you doing a recording so that we can share this. I'm thankful we were able to connect today.
Yes.